I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside. It's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off-road. The guy managed the group. He was like, what are you doing in this beautiful car? I'm like, I'm going off-road. He's like, are you sure? Because you can use one of ours. And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability, as well as its robust interior, are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender. Capella University is rethinking higher education. With its game-changing FlexPath learning format, you can earn your degree on your schedule and fit your education seamlessly into your life. Imagine your future differently at capella.edu.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network. Today on the James Altucher Show.
You figured out early on what it is you wanted to show up for. And I think that's both a blessing and a curse, right?
True.
You've been doing this for God knows how many years, decades, 20 plus years.
I know, can you believe that?
Let me ask you this, though. You mentioned a lot of things you like about the job. Do you think there's anything inside of you which is addicted to having a relevant voice? There's many voices out there, and the voices change. Yours has stayed consistent through the years and the decades. Do you ever get addicted to, like, I need to be still one of those top voices in the space?
This is really important. I do like that people like what I do. And at one point, my wife just said, do you like what you do? How about you? Forget the verification. That's terrific. But do you like it? And will you always like it? Will you always want to work this hard? As long as I enjoy it, I'm going to keep doing it. And she said, well, what happens if you stop enjoying it? And I come back and say, then I will pivot.
So I have Jim Cramer on the show. Jim, we've known each other 16 years now.
It's all been good, James. I was telling my wife, Lisa, I said, I get to see you, and you always bring great joy because you're a tremendous spokesperson for the work that I've done, and I hope that you feel the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it's funny. I wonder how you'd react to this. So I had this podcast with Dr. Oz the other day, and a lot of people have, you know, say both good and bad things about him, and we all have experienced that. But my philosophy I learned from you, which is that, look, if you have to go on TV and 250 days a year, you know, give positive advice to people directly so they don't have to go to, you know, fund managers or brokers or everybody trying to sell them some product. They could just directly be in charge of their financial health, or in Dr. Oz's case, medical health. If you say stuff 250 days a year, some days you're just going to be wrong. But the basic idea is you're trying to tell people, do it yourself. And they're watching you in action while you do it yourself.
Well, look, we didn't know this, but I had dinner with Dr. Oz Saturday night.
You're kidding?
No, not this.
Did you guys just talk about me the whole time?
Yes, it was really, we were obsessed with you. We talked about what you just said, which is the notion of taking control of your life, being really smart about it. And I find him to be a fount of fabulous information.
Yeah.
And I met him because he's a Philadelphia Eagles fan. And he was a long-standing one. He's going to some games with me. And so we were sitting at the same table with for Jeff Lurie, the owner's friends and family party. And I was wrapped as usual because he's got so many things at his fingertips. He was discussing with me the cogency of the J.P. Morgan, Berkshire Hathaway, Amazon coalition to try to get healthcare costs in line, and mentioned to me that, for instance, your copay, you may pay $10 for a copay for some pills, but maybe they only got charged 93 cents, and they're making a huge amount of money in copay. I just use that as an example of how he wants you to take control of your life, and I just find him to be delightful and smart and exciting and just filled with life.
And I agree. I actually I really like both yours and his and many people's philosophy of let's take out the middleman structure ecosystem that is basically, raised fees 1,000%, given bad advice constantly, but like have brainwashed us into thinking this is the correct advice because it's part of the system. And yet people are going to still criticize you or Dr. Oz or other people and say, oh, one day out of 250, he said this, and then the stock went down.
I know. And look, the overriding thesis of Dr. Oz is empowerment.
I think yours as well, with stocks and financial information.
Absolutely. Can I make mistakes? I mean, I was going over today. I was telling people to buy Cimarex not ahead of the quarter, but it's an oil company, and they guided down. And in a snapshot, I'm an idiot. I said buy Cimarex. Now I'm over, and I use that as an example because there is this "what have you done for me lately" thing.
It's only what have you done for me lately? Because the people who are happy, they don't call you and say we're happy. But the people who are mad, they're all over Twitter,
absolutely
everything.
True.
They're writing you letters,
and you have to take it. You have to be like a rhino. You have to have really thick skin.
How long do you think it took you to build that thick skin?
Oh, I would say probably almost 30 years. I had to be.
It's hard, right? It's not as easy as people say, oh, I don't care what they think.
Oh,
but
you do care. And I'll tell you what your Achilles heel is. It's your kids. See, my kids would be upset about something that was said about me. And so even though I might have like a coat of armor, it's just stripped away when your kids are upset. But what I ended up doing is say, okay, I'm going to get up every day. I'm going to put my clothes on, and I'm going to go to work. And even though it might hurt, I'll still work, as opposed to say it doesn't hurt.
Right.
I'll just say, listen, it hurts, but I'm just going to keep going because that's what I know to do. And if you take solace in that, and the solace in the idea that you're going to show up, a la Woody Allen, it's your best defense.
So let me ask you that about showing up. Like, you figured out early on what it is you wanted to show up for.
Yes.
And I think that's both a blessing and a curse, right? Because you've been doing this for God knows how many years, decades, 20 plus years with TheStreet.com alone. And
I know. Can you believe that? 22 years this year with The Street, and still isn't really as known as I'd like. But you were always instrumental in supporting the institution and me with the idea that we were trying to do something different, trying to make sense of stock prices for individuals, trying to make it so that they were stronger, whether they were a client, or stronger whether they do it yourself, because knowledge is indeed power, but knowledge is also disliked. There was something that happened recently with the SIBO and these options on the VIX. And so a whistleblower came forward and hired a lawyer and said, look, they saw manipulation. And immediately CBOE, puts out a note saying the person is ill-informed and doesn't know what he's talking about. And I was saying to myself, please, let's hear the guy out first.
Yeah.
Maybe the guy has a story to tell because a lot of people lost a lot of money. And I want to know why. I don't want to know, the public's interest is what my interest is. And I've always felt that because I don't play for dinner, an NFL term, meaning that I am not the marginal player who has to compromise themselves in order to be able to get on the field. I have the staying power. And I have staying power, fortunately, because I didn't start with money, but I did okay. And I can try to tell the truth for people. And that the truth, knowledge, these all matter. Now, the truth is kind of become a fungible issue with the way the politics is these days. But I know that I know what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do is say, this is what pros do. And I'm trying to do that for a fraction of the cost of what the pros would charge you.
Right. So there's kind of two ends to that. So one is, so many people are saying, well, how could I figure out what my truth is, what the truth is that I want to express, because you've obviously, by having that core truth early on, you've had an amazing career. And then at the end of it, not at the end of the career, but just where we are now, why continue to do it? Now, you can say, oh, because I love it and I'm obsessed with it. There's many things to do in life. Like, are you happy after all these years?
Look, okay, so my wife and I, because I just turned 63.
Congratulations. I just turned 50.
Oh my God. Okay, then these are milestones where you have to, whether you like it or not, you assess.
Yes.
And my wife's theme, Lisa's theme this weekend was, I was with a friend who is at a law firm. And at a law firm, they retire you. So in other words, it's not your choice. And 67 is the retired age. And my friend was saying, how great, how liberating, because you don't have to decide, they decide for you. So then you can go teach, then you can go travel. My father-in-law retired in his 50s, and he travels, and he sees the world, and he is very involved with Hispanic outreach, and he spends a lot of time in charity and helping a hospital system by being on the board. He worked at JP Morgan before, and he's got great expertise. And I'm like trying to figure out, well, wait a second. My dad was 92 when he died. He was selling boxes and bags to retailers. He was selling doggy bags to restaurants. And he died in November, and he had a huge month in October. He had a huge month, and that's me. And it's very antithetical to my wife because she's saying, listen, we have this great house now overseas, and we could spend all the time we want doing whatever we want, seeing things, reading things, not caring. I take a whole month off. And I keep coming back and say, well, my dad had a big month, and he was really happy when he died. No one wants to die, obviously. Well, I mean, some people, there's people who have different ethoses, but in general, he was happy because he worked. And I have that same skein of thought. Now, my friend who's at the firm, the law firm, he was saying that I have a depression mentality.
I think that's correct.
And that is not far from home.
Right. Not knowing you that much in the past few years, but just all the time you're thinking, you have anxiety about what's going on around the world and in your life, and
absolutely. And I when he said that, I said undeniably so. And it was funny because we were playing a game of Hearts, which is one of my absolute. I love playing.
Great games, yes. Shooting the moon.
Oh my God, my wife shot the moon, and we stopped. We had been playing for 3 hours. She shot the moon, and my friend was like, he didn't see it coming. He was so angry. He throws the cards down.
So your wife, the most calm person who just wants to relax and travel, takes a lot of calculation to shoot the moon.
And she's just saying, look, what matters is happiness. And the Dalai Lama says that too, like what matters is happiness. And I said, well, don't do that, because if that is the determinant, I'm going to keep working like my dad because my work makes me happy. And she was saying, no, you're obsessed. What you would be happy with is whatever you choose to do. And if it were to go to Tuscany for a month and go to Mexico for a month, you'd be happy. And I came back and said, look, I just one of those rare people. I got fortunate in that I like my jobs. I like my employer, and I like the creativity of it. And as long as I can do it, I want to keep doing it. But she said, well, you have a good support staff, and if the support staff decided that they had enough, what would happen? I said, well, we'd have to reassess. That's when cross that bridge when it happens.
So it's an interesting thing though, because maybe you would be happy. You have so much energy and knowledge. Maybe you would be happy doing other things like teaching or writing more. Your first book.
Confessions.
Yeah, Confessions. Still one of the classic investment books of all time. You're a great writer. You could be doing more writing instead of just the daily commentary on the news. Have you ever considered kind of making a shift?
Well, that's one-on-one teaching. Basically, you're teaching a small group. I feel like I got this classroom, and the classroom's the people who watch Mad Money, and Mad Money's the prize for me. We write. That's about 9,000 words a day, which if you think about it, anyone who's doing in college, you realize that might be what you do for a semester. It is frenetic, but I don't have it this week because I'm preempted by curling, which is a great sport
in the Olympics.
Fun. But what I think for the Olympics, but what I think I see stories. I mean, I just see stories and I want to tell them. And I just assume tell them to the camera as a classroom because the people I work with are so amazing and they're so exciting. They're young people. They're filled with energy. They energize me. I finish the show between 6 and 6:15 because we tape it. It's called Live to Tape and runs at 6. And I'm always thrilled. I mean, then I do a big download of how we could have done it better. And then it's a challenge. But I just do love it. Now,
but then you do.
Nice
I also see you
out.
do networking dinners. Like you
know,
don't stop
oh my
with the
God,
show.
No, and I keep going out to dinners with CEOs and trying to learn all the time. But I like to learn. I have not been adept at like you. Like I should have been learning cryptocurrency. I should always be learning new things. I remember. In 1989, someone came up to me and said, you should be trading coffee futures. So I did a crash course in coffee futures and did terrible. And I said, no, I got something I really like. I like stocks. And I at that point, I was also trading more bonds. Bonds had a lot of volatility. But I love stocks, and this is the best way to love them, what I do now.
Let me ask you this, though. You mentioned a lot of things you like about the job, but do you think there's anything inside of you which is addicted to having a relevant voice? So there's many voices out there and the voices change. Yours has stayed consistent through the years and the decades. Do you ever get addicted to like, I need to be still one of those top voices in the space. I still need the fans.
Wow. Okay, this is really important because on a one-on-one. So I went to the Eagles Patriots game, the Super Bowl. And when you do that, you're with your wife. And at one point, my wife just said, you're really into the adulation.
Because people were coming up to you.
And I said, well, I'm into the kindness. She goes, no, you're into the adulation. You get a kick out of it. And I said, well, I do like that people like what I do. And she goes, but, do you like what you do? How about you? Forget the verification. That's terrific. But do you like it? And will you always like it? Will you always want to work this hard? And I came back with what she thought was a very short-sighted thought, which I said, I like it now. She goes, no. Really thoughtful people will think, okay, that adulation's not working on what it's not going to last forever. Nothing lasts forever. What's plan B? What else do you want to do? And she felt that my avoidance of the topic was, I don't want to say shallow because that's too pejorative, but someone would have heard the conversation and said, my wife's deep, I'm shallow. And I'm really cognizant of that because she is. She's much more thoughtful about the future than I am because I'm saying, hey, it's a good ride. And I look at it a little more like sports, which is, hey, listen, as long as I can not be Willie Mays, but throw it from center field, as long as I enjoy it, I'm going to keep doing it. And she said, well, what happens if you stop enjoying it? And I come back and say, then I will pivot. But part of doing the show is if people come up to you, it's great. I said, these people I only have a show because these people come up to me. Now, periodically, someone will be rude. Someone was rude the other night.
What'd they say?
People. Well, they throw a camera at someone, or they throw a camera at my wife, or what's the worst one is if they throw a camera at my daughters. Say, listen, take it. Take a picture of me and your father. Take a picture of me and your husband. And it's like, not please and not whatever, and it's awkward and it's not right. But someone came up to me at a bar a couple of nights ago and said, I was busy. I was having a cocktail. I was having a Lagavulin. It was really just a nice moment. And the guy says, so what do you think of the tenure? And I said, well, I actually like to say good evening and how are you? And he said, yeah, but the tenure. And I just stopped. I said, the tenure's fun. And I have another sip of my drink. And I realized he's probably a nice guy. And he was just making a joke. So I turned to him. I said, I'm much more into Amazon. I'm not really telling you guys. He goes, yes, I like Amazon very much. I work at a big investment firm in Baltimore. And I just saw you. And I really wanted to talk to you. And I'm sorry if I was rude. And it's like, no, you weren't rude. I just wasn't ready for you. And I'm sorry. And then I felt great. We had a great 20-minute conversation while I was waiting for my guest. All about FANG, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google, and about the greatness of American ingenuity and whether the notion of overweighting one versus not, portfolio speak. And I liked it.
So, Jim, I know you liked it.
I did.
But I'm going to take your wife's point of view for a second. I don't mean to.
No, but remember, I'm telling you, she's got the high ground.
Right, maybe, but let's just also look at it a different way. One is she's saying you like that adulation, the people coming up to you.
Right.
Sure, you had a great intellectual conversation with him, but you didn't know him. You didn't know it would be an intellectual conversation. You didn't know you felt good because he came up to you for advice. I'm just saying.
No, so far the narrative's right.
But what your wife is also asking you, are you choosing this in the long term over me? She's asking you, is the adulation you're getting better than going to Mexico or Tuscany with me? And that's a little bit of what she's asking you.
Yes, it is. And my kids are not asking me. My kids are telling me, I said, Dad, when you're with me, you're with me. When I'm with my daughter in Oregon, my daughter wants me to speak lowly because my voice is recognizable. And to wear a hat, if I wear a hat and sunglasses, even better. We try to go to places where it's inconceivable and anyone would know me because there's not a lot of cable out in Oregon. Because she said, Dad, it's cherish time. I cherish it. Let's not share it with others who frankly have nothing to do with us and really are not special versus you and me because we don't get to see each other much because we're in Oregon. And that's checkmate. I mean, a willing checkmate. How great it is that at 26 she still wants to be with me.
I can't believe your daughter's 26.
I know. They were little when we first started working together. But my daughter's right, and my wife is right. When I say right, it means that I am to some degree wrong. I come back and say it's just as easy to be nice to be mean. I'm going to be nice to someone if they come up to me, and even with the fellow that I talked about with the tenure. But then we go back to again what my eldest says, which is, Dad, get serious about your life and stop thinking, does that person like me? Stop wanting to be liked. It's a worthless pursuit. She works at she works in the mental health field, working with troubled youths at a residential facility. And she said the people I work with are struggling, obviously, but my life's meaningful. And, I want you to have a meaningful life. I'm trying to help people, and you're trying to help people financially, but I want you to be more. I think there's more to life than doing a show. And I said, well, look, I love you. I love your sister. I love my wife. I love all my cousins. I love my sister. And she said, well, yeah, but you have to say it. You have to say it. I mean, it should just be, you don't have to say it when you're protesting too much. And yeah, look, I don't know. There are many levels, James, that I'm problematic. Okay, and you're hitting on problematic, but it doesn't bother me to talk about it. But I know I'm problematic on this, and so then we come back to the depression era and my father. Okay, and maybe the adulation or the scorn, because I've had that too. It comes with the territory, but it's the territory of having the psychological fulfillment of working.
Right.
And now I love vacation. I absolutely love vacation. But at the end of my vacation, I almost always want to go back to work. I feel recharged and I'm ready. There are some vacations that are too quick, and it's not like that. But for the most part, it's okay. That was fabulous, and now let's hit it. And that's me. It's never like, oh my God, I got to go back. It's when I say never, I mean it's the rare times, and the rare times tend to be vacations that are huge sightseeing on the road. Get up at 7.
So it's still a high energy, high impact vacation. And you don't lie on the beach.
Exactly. And we're going to Tuscany next week, and we're going to have 2 museum days. But the other days are going to be just to read around the fire because my wife says I need recharging. And she said, when you're finished, you'll be ready. And so I look at the vacations and as interludes between work. I'm not there yet to look at the vacations as being why you work.
Right. And I get that. Look, it's one thing for everybody to say you like the adulation and all that stuff. But look, you've been doing this for 30 years. Right. So it's in your brain. Your brain is wired for it.
Yes, it is.
You're looking at each person on the street and they're looking at you and they recognize you. So, and it feels good. Your brain's wired to think that way.
Right.
You can't just rewire.
No, I can't.
But how would you, let's say you decided, okay, a move towards happiness would be not necessarily rewiring, but a move towards rewiring. How would you start that process?
Okay, I would probably have to give up mad money.
Well, that's an extreme. What would be a smaller step than that?
A smaller step, I think, would just say, okay, guys, I get 6 weeks off, all right? So this is a week I'm taking off. And it's just tough that you need me this week. That's what I'm going to do. Instead, I take far less time off. I would also, I think, to a certain extent at the street, say, guys, look, I'm not going to write the 3 to 4 pieces a day and the 15 videos. I'm going to do stuff, but it has to be at a different pace. And I don't want to do the administrative because the administrative really upsets me. And I think that would be the way. The administrative is worrisome.
I feel like you've been saying that for 10 years.
Well, I think that you'd be right. And that's the flaw in my life right now.
And so again, even a smaller step then, because you've been saying this, so it's too big a step for you to do.
Well, I haven't been able to do it. I always am hopeful that we have such a big organization, so good that they wouldn't be as dependent on me, and it's a bit but I love to write.
Yeah.
See, that's one of the things I've always loved to write. I remember when my late mom, she was dying of cancer, and I was at Goldman Sachs. And I came home one night. I said, I had the biggest month, blah, 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 blah. I made this. And she said to me, it was probably 2 months before she died. She goes, you used to be a writer. You used to be creative. She was in this period of tremendous clarity where she was quite affirmative about her stances in life. And she goes, it's shameful. It's shameful that you wanted to be creative and now you're not. Promise me one day you'll be creative. Well, I gave up the money management business and I write every day, and I love it. I mean, I wrote a piece this morning. I got up at 3:30, and I wrote this piece about protecting the public and why the SEC has to step up. Because the ICE, the CBO, all these exchanges, they're not going to say, hey, we're going to protect the public. They're profit-making institutions. And the CBO, if there are people who want double and triple ETFs to lever up and borrow money, the CBO's not going to say, you know what, that's not in the public's interest. It's the government. So it was kind of a forceful piece about how the SEC has to rethink what they've done with these pieces of paper because they're hurting people. And I finished it at 6:15, and I filed it. And I went up to Lisa, who was sleeping, and I said, I just did a piece I really like. And she said, yeah. I said, no, it's really important about protecting the public. And she was fabulous. And I said, you don't understand. And she goes, no, I don't, and I'm trying to sleep. And I said, okay. But it made me happy. And she goes, I'm so glad you're happy. And then I went to work. But it was a piece that I really liked. And it was 670 words, and I thought did it a bunch of times. And I said, oh, this is good. This is good. And I was really excited about it. And as long as I'm still excited about this, good sign. It wasn't drudgery.
Right.
I thought it really made it a point. Now, there'll be very few people who read it, but I feel good about writing.
So let's go hardcore into that for a second. So much money has gone into ETFs and institutional money. Retail investors are not out there like they were in the 90s or even the 00s. So it's so easy for financial institutions to create these products like the XIV and then derivatives on them that are totally illiquid, but playing those derivatives will completely manipulate the entire market. Is there a way? So the market is manipulated in that sense, that there's a few players and a few financial instruments with not as much liquidity as you would like that can manipulate how the entire universe thinks about the market. And so is there a way to actually regulate that or slow it down? They always try, let's stop, let's regulate, collateralized mortgage derivatives. Let's start regulating other financial innovations. But always there's the next thing.
Well, I always hope that the Fed, which controls margin, would say, you need 100% margin to do this. That would be great. Or it should be off-board, meaning there shouldn't be something that's so accessible to the public that you can make a deal with Morgan on the VIX or Goldman. But the SEC abdicated its job when it said that these are pieces of paper that are basically sophisticated, and that's fine. I mean, to me, these are pieces of paper that should be stickered like tobacco. I mean, this can really hurt people. It settles every day. People think it's a great way to hedge. It's not a great way to hedge. Obviously, when things go wrong, volatility turns out not to be an asset. Turns out it's not an asset.
Right.
I mean, until this happened, there was volatility. It's like gold and real estate.
Right, there's no actual settlement.
No, there's nothing. And so I think, and you use the term manipulation, and so I use that, and then the people who create these instruments say, Cramer doesn't know what he's talking about. And that is the one I really hate. because like Cramer actually does know what he's talking about, not to be speaking third person, but you and I both correctly, I think entirely, summarized the entire debacle that is the VIX. And I listened to you and I said, James agrees with me, and James also has the same interests at heart, which is the public. I mean, we don't want to gain fees on these. We are not vested in the profit motive like some institutions are. We're thinking about, did anyone know that these were going to blow you up? Now, if you go back to the original SEC rulings on the double and triple, they said, well, look, the market's really deep and they can't be manipulated because the market's really deep. Well, the markets are nowhere near as deep as when they first did the original research. And they said that the public would be very smart about it. There's no indication that the public's smart about it.
Public's not in the market.
Right.
The ETFs are in the market.
Right. So, I mean, I think that what you and I, it's readily apparent to us, but not to the interested parties and not to the government, that somebody's getting hurt. And what I want to do, my ethos has always been the same, which is that stocks are the greatest wealth creator of all time. Although Bitcoin is obviously in the last 24 months has certainly beat it. And I'm not denying that. But stocks over the long term have been great. And you fall back on a Jeremy Siegel now since he does thorough work. And but I've seen junctures where people get blown out. And so therefore they're earning, say, 1% or 2% on their cash. And they're living much longer than they used to. So they're using parallels that say we should be in cash at the age of 64. And that's not, no. It's the longevity tables, the actuarial tables say that you're going to need a bigger retirement money. And if you didn't invest in the stock market over the long term, I fear you'll run out. And when you run out in an age when healthcare costs so much, you can really be hurt. And I don't want that. And I think that, as we mentioned, Dr. Oz talking about empowerment. He's a guy who is always talking about longevity, how people can, lead their lives longer and be taking charge of their lives. But if you don't have any money, he once told me the leading cause of bankruptcy is healthcare. The leading cause, not bad investing, whatever. So you've got to make sure you have enough money. You got to make sure you have enough healthcare. And you've got to be sure that you don't get out of the market and substitute into something that's 1% so you can't pay for the healthcare and go bankrupt.
What do you think is and I know this question has many answers, but let's say you live in middle America. What's the number to retire? Or to not retire, but at least not worry about your future years and the future longevity of people?
If you're away from the coast, I could see that you might have the wherewithal on $1 million for 10 years.
10 years, but now people are living 30 or 40 years more.
No, I worry about the wherewithal. I mean, because you do have Social Security, but it's not that much. And
how many people have $1 million?
It's healthcare.
Yeah.
It's healthcare. If there were no issues at healthcare, and obviously there's Medicare, you can get by and stuff. But my father had the VA, he had Medicare, but he kept working. But $1 million for $100,000 a year is a lot of money. But if you put away money in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s,
which nobody
60s,
does, we're at a 1% savings rate.
Nobody does. So what happens is people have to keep working.
Yeah.
And so we go back to the issue of work. Not everybody has satisfying work, but they have to work longer than they thought. That's the big change.
Let me ask you this, and this is going to be a naive question, but if healthcare costs are the problem, what if we simply, and this is just abstract thinking, what if we simply did away with the FDA, which would drive down the costs of all the major drugs that help the obscure diseases the elderly get? Let's stop to take a quick break. We'll be right back. You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. The future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like, the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a Masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get two memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply.
AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry, and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power, so how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/advance. That's oracle.com/advance. oracle.com/advance.
Every podcast I do is so personal and special to me. The podcast is all about how people can be better performers, even peak performers at whatever it is they're passionate about. So help people discover this podcast. Help me, help the listeners. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or wherever it is you get your podcasts. You can also check out the show notes at jamesaltucher.com/podcast. And also, if you want to get my blog updates and other updates that I do, sign up for the newsletter at jamesaltucher.com. Once again, thanks so much for joining me on the journey of this podcast. Let me ask you this, and this is going to be a naive question, but if healthcare costs are the problem, what if we simply, and this is just abstract thinking, what if we simply did away with the FDA, which would drive down the costs of all the major drugs that help the obscure diseases the elderly get?
Okay, well, that's what they do in China. And they have acceptable loss rate of people who die. And that's not our culture.
Right.
But they get more health care to people. So I have a friend, my wife's cousin, who came up with a device that you can put a drop of blood on a petri dish, whatever, and detect a lot of different cancers. He thinks it's really great, and they're looking at it at Mount Sinai and looking at it at Sloan Kettering. And he goes to Shanghai, and they immediately adopt it at the hospitals. Now, why do they adopt the hospitals? It's really interesting. The hospitals have 500,000 people each, patients a year. 500,000 people. So they're willing to say, you know what, we just got to use it. And he said, well, it's not approved yet by the FDA. They want to have 2-3 years of study. And the Chinese said, well, we can't afford that. We have people dying all the time from cancer. We got to put it to work. And if it's got some false positives, so be it. But, we got to do this to save people's lives. And their imperative is different from ours. But I kind of agree with their imperative to some degree because it does cost $3 to $4 billion to bring a drug to market.
And many people will die during those 3 to 4 years anyway from those diseases.
Yes. And so you end up with these people, these drug tests where you have to get people who are about to die to use to test the drug. So even the studies are hard to put together because people keep dying.
And it costs $2 billion to get through a drug through the FDA.
$2 billion. And I just
they have to pay that back with high costs.
So then you get into the $400,000 a year, $500,000 a year for the orphan drugs, which are obviously is this drain on the system. But then again, if it was your kid, it's really
I'd go to
difficult.
China with my kid.
That's not a bad idea. China, I think, is doing many things right to be able to help the most people. And the government is obviously 1 million people dying a year of respiratory illnesses, so they're like panicked on that. They don't want revolution.
Yeah.
But I do think that when my wife's cousin went over there, he was shocked. But then when they said, listen, there's 500,000 people, we need a cancer test now. We don't have the time to do 3 years worth of studying and have all these people dying. And he said, well, that is actually right. That's right. And my test is good enough to detect breast cancer. And it's kind of monumental in the way that the two societies think about the issue.
So every couple of years you've been doing a book. It's always a great book on educating the population. Plus there's your initial book, which is the classic. What's next?
I want to do this book for millennials about investing. There you came across that issue of how do you manage your time? I'm working harder than ever. My wife does not want me to do the book because
how do you manage your time? You do
I keep getting
books,
up earlier,
writing.
and earlier, and I have been cutting into a lot of time. We went out last night for Valentine's Day, and we got back at 9:00, and I said, I have to read the Cisco conference call, and I have to read the Applied Materials conference call. I have to study international flavors and fragrances. She says, stop. you're going to bed. Okay. And I said, no. She goes, okay, well, you're going to read it in bed and you're going to fall asleep. I said, no, I am going to sit here and I will come upstairs after I read the AMAC call. And she said, how many AMAC calls have you been on? And I said, well, what does that have to do with anything? I got one tonight. And David Faber may turn to me and say, well, what did you think about Applied Materials? She goes, oh, so that's what you do? You do it for David Faber? I said, no.
See,
I
she's
do
asking
it for
about
myself.
herself there, too.
Right. Myself and
You were choosing David Faber over her.
Exactly. And that's how she came down at the end. She goes, the show's not the thing. I mean, you may be insecure and feel like you need to talk about Cisco. I interviewed the Boeing CEO. She goes, but we just had a really nice dinner. Let's go up. Maybe we'll watch something together. And I said, I didn't snap at her. I said, I really can't do that. So I came up an hour later. She was asleep. And she goes, I woke her up. And I said, well, I really had a nice time at dinner. She goes, oh, I'm really glad you did. I had a good time too. And because I didn't want to go to bed on the in an attitude of confrontation, because I don't like to do that. And because my wife's great. And we ended up, and she goes, did you get all the things you feel good about tomorrow? Do you feel confident? And I said, yes, I feel confident. She goes, okay, that's very good. And I'm sorry if I, just was saying don't do your homework. I said, look, I'm sorry that I did my homework, but I know that I'll be happier tomorrow. And she goes, well, it's kind of a shame. It's a kind of a shame that at 63, you come home from a really nice dinner and you immediately sit at the kitchen table and you start reading the conference call of Boeing. And I said, but I'm fascinated by the CEO of Boeing and Dennis Muhlenberg, and he deserves everything. He deserves the respect that I have to show by doing the homework.
So I'll give you a technique that I read, written by a young man named Jim Cramer about 10 years ago or so. You wrote, I think in your third book, you're describing how to do a lightning round. And you basically said, if someone asks a question about a company that you don't know 100% about, you'll know enough about other companies in the space, plus you'll have an opinion on the space, that you'll be able to direct it down into that other company, into the space. You could always do that. None of the listeners will know. David Faber won't know. And you'll be still giving good advice.
But I'll know.
You'll know.
I'll know.
You'll know.
And there's the CEO, Dennis Muhlenberg, or Chuck Robbins, who's my friend. I'm not about friends, but about money. But that's what I said at the beginning of the show. But Chuck's a huge Falcon fan. So when the Eagles beat the Falcons, and we joke a lot. He went to UNC. UNC looks hot. So we talk about sports. But Chuck had a really good quarter. And Kelly Kramer is the CFO, and she's K, not C. And they're fabulous. And Chuck said, listen, I want to come on the show. Well, that was just total turmoil for me because I had everything. All my time was going to be spent doing the homework on Boeing. So then I have to pivot and do Boeing and then Cisco. And then it turns out that Cisco is really hard because they have this 9000 switch. It's called the CAT 9000. And I'm like frantically emailing people, tell me how the CAT 9000 works. And I'm Googling the CAT 9000. It's a campus switch. Well, what does that mean at Kimball? It's a wide-ranging enterprise switch. Well, yeah, but I want to know how I ask a question. And then the red light goes on and I'm not ready. I'm not ready about the campus switch. So then I decided to talk about deferred revenue and software and the need to be able to get away from a white box and have a sophisticated company like Cisco come in. And at the end, I did the interview and I turned to David. I said, no, didn't do a good job. And he goes, why did you say that? I said, well, I wasn't ready.
I don't know. Ready. It sounds like you're pretty ready.
I wasn't ready. Now, you raised a good point, which is the people know. And Chuck knew. I think thought I did a good job. The fact now, Lisa would say, does it really even matter that he thinks you did a good job? Do you think you did a good job? And I would come back and say, I could have done a better job. But I couldn't have done a better job on Boeing. I got everything, including the Elon Musk question I wanted, which I said, is Musk the greatest promoter and you're the greatest operator? I got a great story that he told about how the rocket has got to be 36 stories high to reach Mars. And I really liked the interview. When I finished the interview, I turned to David and said, we nailed it. And he goes, yeah, we nailed it. And so I was 1 for 2.
Well, Jim, it's always a pleasure.
Oh, don't stop yet. I got some other stuff to ask you.
Okay, well, let me ask you a question. What did he say? Was Elon Musk the greatest promoter?
He said that we're the greatest operator. He said some people are very good at telling the story.
Well, because a lot of the Elon Musk companies, there's sort of a welfare system in place. Like either the government is subsidizing it or he's subsidizing. Like he brings Solar City into the Tesla umbrella because maybe that's going to lose its welfare from the government. So I don't know. It's an interesting thing. Like the power of charisma is worth billions of dollars.
Yes. And it's interesting because he had the rocket go off and then the next day he reported. And the first question on the call was about the rocket because the rocket was mesmerizing. And we all watched it. Everybody watched it. And it was kind of like, oh, yeah, I also had the earnings. All right, we're losing a lot of money. But how about the rocket? And it was a diversion. In the end, I decided it was a diversion, that the timing was such that he even wanted it to be a diversion. And I think that's maybe that's too harsh.
It could be because I always think if a company is doing too many positive press releases right before earnings, that's a warning sign.
I totally agree with you.
So
I totally
why
agree.
are they telling us the good news now? Why not wait till earnings?
No, absolutely. And I think that was really right. And I do believe he's a hype artist. I had a terrible experience with him. I was at a dinner, and he was talking about how all the power for the country is going to come from a group of solar panels in the northwest corner of Utah. And I said, that may be very well and good, but it's not going to happen now because of friction and we have an electric system that is really we're stuck with it. I hope that there's a transition to that. It's a nice dream. I said, it's a nice dream. And he looked at me and he said, how do I know that you're not just a hologram? I mean, honestly, I think there's a 50% chance that you're just a hologram. And I was speechless. And I said, well, I was just putting up an argument. I mean, he goes, nah, I think you're a hologram. And that was it. Everyone around the table was looking at me. It's like, I didn't know what to say. He's a dirty fighter.
That's funny. Well, I thought when you said power, where's the power coming from? I thought you meant human power in the sense that, is the power in the hands of Washington, D.C., or is the power in the hands of Silicon Valley?
He games it. I don't like that. He games it. Correctly.
Who doesn't?
Who doesn't game it? Andy Grove, when he started Intel, he certainly didn't game it. It was like I'm just picking him as because he wrote this great business book called Only the Paranoid Survive, where he literally just talks about human ingenuity and the need to harness it. And it's a great book, Only the Paranoid Survive, because what he says is the human beings can and should be put under the microscope to deliver. And they need to deliver based on their own resources. He had come from Hungary, family, victims, Holocaust survivors, and he just kind of just made it. It wasn't Ayn Rand, okay? It was not Ayn Rand. It was that people. It
was about competence. Because you could look at Ayn Rand and say, okay, yeah, she's this arch capitalist, don't care, but anyway. But the other way to look at Ayn Rand is to say, oh, this is a book about competent people.
Yes.
Like this is a how-to guide on how to be competent, and many people want to be incompetent and let the competent people take care of them. That was kind of another way of looking at her thing, and that's what he's saying.
That's kind of exactly what I'm saying. And he's one of my idols. He passed away, but. Yeah, extremely competent, and you want to measure yourself against that. Perfectly realistic.
But if you look at power distributed in the U.S. among people, it seems like the technology companies, they have so much information about each person. They really know everything about us. And I'm not even talking about privacy because that was gone a long time ago. And then you look at the ineffectiveness of D.C. and you wonder, the competence has followed Andy Grove, and it's all in Silicon Valley, and they're able to kind of take resources from DC, a la Tesla, with being subsidized and other things and other companies. You wonder, where does human power where is that located now?
It's a great question.
And who controls the SEC, for instance? Is it really Washington D.C. that doesn't know anything about it?
I think the regulators are often captured by the exchanges. Yeah. We were playing with Alexa this weekend, asking her various questions, and at one point, I asked her, we're always asking her to play music. That's fun, right? But, we were asking, Alexa, who's the better team? Alexa, who's this? And sometimes she punts, sometimes she doesn't. And then we all sat around and said, Alexa, we think she's activated only when we say Alexa. Maybe she's activated all the time, and she has all this information. And then we all agreed, well, so what? That's just the way it is now. They figured it out. They have all the information. There's nothing we can do about it. They're really convenient and fun.
And Alexa's probably listening when you think she's turned off. And I say she for no reason. But
I think she is. But we sacrifice the lack of privacy for the ease.
Yeah.
It's with this. Now, when I was out at visiting Google, Alphabet, I saw a robot that had a robot. It had a hand that was artificial, prosthetic device that they were making for the army for people who had lost their limbs. And I said, well, how's it working? He said, well, it's great. It knows how to pick up a cup of coffee. It even knows how to let it cool so that the person isn't burned. I said, how did you program that? And the woman who was my guide said, we actually don't know how I figured it. Huh. And I said, well, isn't that Skynet? That's Skynet. That's Skynet, Terminator. And she said, no, we just didn't know how he did it. And so many of us are worried about bigger issues. They're worried about solving these particular problems. And, God love them. But I don't know where society's going to go ultimately with these people. And I do know that we should be worrying about jobs and what's going to happen with people who like checkers when we all use our Apple phone to get through, or Amazon, whatever, to go to a store and we don't need to check out. What do we do with the 3 million people that are checkers?
You don't think, look, what did we do with all the people who made horse whipping whips?
I think that it's a little different now. One, I think there's too many people to be able to do that, but also the government has to be involved. And I think when we think about the government, we think about incompetence, and that's a shame. But I just fear that there'll be people who are left behind because the public educational system is not great in our country.
Right.
And I wish it were better. And if it were better, then I wouldn't be as concerned.
If you let me, I'm going to give you one piece of advice you should do based on this discussion. I think you should write a column, not for TheStreet.com or CNBC or any financial publication. Find Sports Illustrated and write a column for Sports Illustrated. You could tell that they'll let you do it, right? If you call them up.
ESPN would. Yeah. ESPN would. They asked me to do some stuff.
Just keep it just to sports.
That would be so much fun.
A week. Just do 500 words a week or every 2 weeks and just see what it feels like to play a new role for the first time in 30 years.
I want to do that. And I'm friends with Adam Schefter. He's a good friend of mine who's a reporter for ESPN. And I'm going to ask him, is there an outlet for me?
Yeah.
See if there's an outlet.
He's totally going to say yes. And you're going to enjoy that more than anything right now. You've mentioned sports half this podcast.
Well, the Eagles were so
I know,
important
the Eagles
to me. And I have insights that I think are important about what fandom is. That is, I do a lot of fantasy football. It's not that. Matthew Berry's great about that.
Matthew Berry. He's been on the podcast.
He has?
Yeah. He's a good friend of mine.
Isn't he great?
He's amazing.
He's a real guy.
And he's recognized everywhere. People say, thank you, I did your picks.
Oh, he's great. His daughter's going to Tulane like my daughter, and I just find him really sweet. He was going to be the second person I was going to call to say, can I write something? Because he's a big supporter of what I do, and I'm a huge supporter of what he does.
Yeah,
so I
he's
like
good.
your suggestion, James. Thank you.
Well, Jim, thanks so much again for coming on the podcast. I hope
I do okay?
You did great, and come on again.
My wife would say, "Did you have to ask that? Were you happy with it?" And I say, "Yeah, but I want my friend to be happy with it too. It's okay."
Well, I'm going to tell you also, just spend a tiny bit more time with your wife. I don't mean to be your therapist. You don't need a therapist.
No, we're going away to Tuscany and with no friends, and we're doing that because at my request, I said, I don't spend enough time with you. And she said, then that's what we're going to do.
And I only say that because I've lost a marriage for that reason. So,
I've had, problematic too, although I have a fabulous relationship with Karen Cramer, and I'm thrilled about that. But
that's great.
But that took a long time too.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Jim.
Next time on The James Altucher Show.
Terrorists function by capturing our imagination, turning our imagination against us, and causing us to overreact. This is the way terrorism functions. In a way, a terrorist is like a fly that tries to destroy a china shop. The fly is so small and weak, it cannot move in even a single teacup. So how does a fly destroy a china shop? The fly finds a bull, gets into the ear of the bull, and starts buzzing. The bull becomes so enraged that it loses its temper and destroys the china shop. This is what happened in the Middle East over the last 15 years. Al-Qaeda could never have destroyed Iraq by itself. It got into the ear of the United States, and the United States went wild and destroyed the Middle Eastern China shop for Al-Qaeda. This is how terrorism functions. And if you want to fight terrorism, you should start with your own imagination.
Hey, I am so glad you listened to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it as well. Please take a moment to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or wherever it is you get your podcasts. It will only take you a second, but it will help other people discover the podcast. And my goal is to share this great content with as many people as possible. To see the show notes, just head on over to jamesaltucher.com/podcast. While you are there, you can join my free insiders list to get notified when I post a new podcast. Every day, I also share my best and most controversial ideas. You won't get this stuff anywhere else. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.
AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry, and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power, so how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/advance. That's oracle.com/advance. oracle.com/advance.